Thank you for joining us today for today's recorded session on working with or interfacing with angry clients. So, why did we choose this subject? Many of you have said, Cora, how do we work with clients that are simply too angry? And we're living in an environment where people are very angry. So, we've developed this particular session with Dr. Jerry Tart. We're delighted to have her here with us, and we'll go ahead and get started. Since this is an informational session, there will be no test at the end of this particular webinar. Please save the thank you for attending email that you're going to receive at least about an hour after the webinar ends as your evidence that you've attended this session. This session is being brought to you by Diversified Resource Network, formerly the Counselor's Corner, in conjunction with Dr. Jerry Tart. My name is Cora Fulmore. I will be your producer for this particular session. Many of you know that I am the owner of the Mortgage and Credit Center and the creator of the Counselor's Corner, now doing business as Diversified Resource Network. I've got several years of counseling experience, and you guys have made the Counselor's Corner what we are by your input. And that's why we brought this particular session to you. We're delighted to have Dr. Jerry Tart. And at this point, I'll turn it over to Dr. Tart.
Good afternoon. It is so great to be here again. I so appreciate all of the efforts, all of the uh, energy that you all have placed in doing the kind of work that you do. And it is so exciting. And I was so happy to speak with Cora again regarding dealing with difficult circumstances, and particularly how to deal with angry clients and stay healthy and recognize that there are things that we can do. So we're going to just kind of go right into what we're going to be looking at. And the first thing I want you to understand would be the objectives. And I want you to recognize that we're wanting to have a working definition of anger and to understand the differences between unhealthy and healthy anger, as well as what happens to each of us when we tend to get angry. There are three types of personalities that we're going to address, three types of anger rather, that we're going to address today, as well as four types of personalities. There are consequences to anything that we do. So it's important to understand that unbridled anger comes also with consequences, as well as interfacing in a healthy and safe way. Cora mentioned early on in terms of the climate that we are contending with today. So it's imperative that we recognize that there is a safe way to deal with certain circumstances. And then, of course, we want to end on a positive note about the best attitudes towards anger. When we talk about anger, or we want to understand what anger is, we do recognize that it's an emotion, and it's mostly an automatic response to pain. We understand that sometimes it doesn't have to be physical pain. Emotional pain comes about when we feel that in some regard or the other that we have been dismissed. Sometimes it may be an assessment that we've made. Sometimes it's an assumption or whatever. For sure, it is a perception. It's our perception. And if that perception is that we've been wronged in some way or the other, it can trigger or generate that strong emotion of anger. So with that, we understand that when we are feeling this way, then it depends on how we choose, because it is a conscious decision to choose what we're going to do when we feel angry. There's a lot of things that we've recognized in our society as it relates to what permissions that have been given. Sometimes we've been conditioned to believe that we aren't to show our emotions in any regard, particularly our anger. Unhealthy anger holds fast to that concept, so we don't release our anger in communication. Sometimes we pout, and we're going to talk about those things later on too. But that sense of powerlessness or helplessness, we don't accept the fact that it's anger that we're feeling. Sometimes we feel that we aren't supposed to call it anger, depending on our societal norms or the place from which we've come in terms of what we've been conditioned to believe. Our anger, please recognize that anger is an emotion. It is neither logical or illogical. However, the behavior that comes with that anger can be irrational or rational, the thought processes are either logical or illogical. So we want to understand that with unhealthy anger, sometimes our behavior is acted out in an irrational or an illogical manner because of the conditions that we've believed. Okay. Healthy anger, however, requires us to change the image that we have about anger. One of the things that I would encourage is that we try to find what is a positive perspective. Remember what I said early on in terms of why anger is called anger. So we have to think about our perception. What perception am I using when I think of the fact that I have been offended in some regard or I am hurt? Could it have been perceived differently? Is it possible that there's another way that I could look at it, or can I assess the circumstance differently? So we're shifting from a negative perspective because of what we have defined anger as to a positive perspective. Oftentimes, shifting our paradigm is simply saying yes to something rather than an automatic feeling or an automatic statement of no, simply because of the feeling that we are experiencing. We want to recognize that healthy anger requires effective actions. So there's a way in which it is that we can deal with anger, and we can use that energy, and we can find, as a result of the energy of looking at anger from a positive perspective, we can find joy. There are perspectives that are open so we can become more optimistic, and we can truly be enthusiastic about the fact that, oh, as a result of revisiting this experience that we had, that once upon a time we felt very locked into, that we couldn't see it any other way other than a negative way. Now, stretching yourselves and looking at the paradigm, shifting your paradigm and looking at it from a different perspective, we are now able to use the energy from that anger in a positive, effective manner. What happens when we are angry? What does the body do? When we first experience that sensation, we may not understand what's going on, but that fear factor becomes a part of the mindset. So our brain has told the body that in some regard or the other, we are in a dangerous a dangerous situation. So we see the situation from that perspective, and the body uh, gestures would be fight, flight, or freeze. We become, our feeling of the internal sensations are different because our breathing is different. We become fleshed. Some of us may have sweaty palms, or we may find ourselves clenching our jaws, or as I said before, our breathing is different, and it's the heightened sensation, palpitations of the heart. So and that's a part of the adrenal system, and as a result of that, we're getting a significant amount of adrenaline or cortisol in our body. So as a result of the release of those hormones, something is going to have to give. The brain has already given the body the perspective that it is in danger. So now we are wanting to find a safe way out of that situation. So our blood pressure is elevated. Our respiratory system is different because we're increasing. Our breathing is different. So the effort here is that the body has been given an alert by the brain that it needs to react differently. So we want to understand that that's a learned behavior. And as we talked about a moment ago, in terms of healthy anger, we want to reprogram, but we have to become aware. We have to become sensitive to the fact that the body is going to do what it does when it believes that it is under attack. So with that being said, we go and we revisit or we rethink the situation. That's one of the reasons that I said we have to ask ourselves the question, is it possible that I can reassess this differently? Do I hear what's being said? Am I understanding it in the present moment, or am I pulling information from a different place? And if I am, then the body is going to do what it has always done in a frightening situation. But if I understand that I am not in imminent danger, then I'm more likely to be able to orchestrate differently through this particular circumstance. So as counselors, when individuals come in, and let's just say it's someone that you've seen before, if the experience was very, very negative, recognize that even before you say anything to the client, you are already having reactions to an old experience. So that's one of the reasons that I'm saying that it's important to revisit. Okay, here comes John. I recognize that he's here. He looks a little bit differently. Then maybe he's feeling a little bit differently. Then I want my experience with John to be a little bit different today. Therefore, the body is going to not be on the alert that I'm in imminent danger simply because I'm looking at John or I see John. So, having gone through those few slides and saying the things that we've said, I've got some questions that I want you to ponder. And one is, I want you to recognize what is one of the definitions of anger. What happens when we call anger anger? What is an attribute of healthy anger? What does that look like? And then, what are some of the ways that the body reacts to anger? In giving those questions, I was prepared because I wanted to at least give you an answer from the data that I've just given you to the questions that I just asked. Anger, what is anger? It's a feeling that is oriented towards some real or supposed grievance. One of the things that we understand about healthy anger is that it can be an effective action. We can do something positive as a result of recognizing anger differently. And we do know that our bodies will react to this sensation of danger with an increased flow of adrenaline and cortisol. So those are the answers to the three questions that I'd asked earlier. As we move forward, we want to talk about three types of anger. There is a passive aggression, there's open aggression, and then there's assertive anger. I want to talk about those because the probability is greater than not that we've either experienced one or all three of these types of anger. So, giving a working definition, let's start with progressive, passive aggression. Okay, this is when I used to say throwing the ball and hiding your hands, but what it is that passive aggression is when you are angry, but you don't want to admit it, or you don't want to recognize it as anger. I'm not angry. There's nothing wrong. Well, what's the matter? There's nothing wrong. Yes, it is. Your body language has changed. No, there's nothing wrong. So then we go on, and it is often used um, because we tell ourselves, well, I don't necessarily like confrontation, but we want to be, in some regard, we want to be in control. The circumstance may be between other you and someone else, or you and your manager, or whatever, or you've said something to a client and you want them to hear you, but because of their behavior, and their behavior could be very passive. You may give them a directive and they'll give you a yeah, but, or every experience, for every positive note that you give them, they'll give you a negative comeback or whatever. So you can give yourself permission to recognize, okay, this person may be they're being a little bit passive about what it is that I'm saying. They don't want to accept what I'm saying, but they aren't going to say that. They're just going to tell me every experience that they've had regarding whatever it is that you may have shared with them, that they know that it's not going to work already. The anger presents as silence, or sulking, or procrastinating. If you may ask your client, well, does this make sense? Do you understand what it is that I'm sharing? You think that this is something that you can do? Well, yeah, I'll get around to it. Maybe I'll start that budget in June, because right now I've got so many things on my plate that I have to pay, and I've got to do this, that, and the third, and I got this trip, and I wanted to take care of this. But I really want that house. I'm gonna get this budget started. That could be a gesture of passive aggression. It also looks like the person really, they're leaning into you. If you're sitting at the desk and they're saying, uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, that's a good idea, uh-huh, uh-huh. But it's almost like they are saying it and their fingers are crossed, as it were. Or they are, and that comes across as being overly anxious, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to take in what it is that you're saying. Or you're saying something, you ask a very direct question to John. And rather than him answering, you can see that he crosses his arms or he crosses his legs, and his body language become very tight or whatever. So you aren't necessarily understanding why they're acting like that. And that may be because you've said something that they know that they need to do differently, but they aren't willing to give that up, just as I said a moment ago. Or you know how people can roll their eyes, or like, yeah, right, I understand. But they, again, that could be a gesture of passive aggression. There's a pattern of disrespect. Girl, you don't know what you're talking about. Who are you talking? Child, you just graduated from. I know what I'm talking about, child. I'm old enough to be your mom. Those kinds of statements can be statements of passive aggression. So be mindful of that. And one of the reasons that I want to say this is because when you're trying to share healthy information to someone, with someone rather, to get to something that they say that they want, but they give you this kind of pushback, it may be difficult initially, but please try to remember not to take it personal, because to do that will derail you. And let's just say, again, with passive aggression, you're talking with the couple and you find that one is blaming the other. Yes, I told him that, or yes, I told her that, but she decided to do this and follow somebody else's and whatever, whatever. Or nothing is ever right. They've already told you from the very beginning, it's not going to work the way that you said it, because nothing like what you're saying has ever happened to me. Or, as I said before, they'll procrastinate. Yeah, I'm going to start tomorrow. But then the behavior is seemingly so sincere that they're almost in tears, but there's no effort. There's no accountability on their part to do the right thing, or to do what you're suggesting to them as the right thing, because it's about giving, as I said before, their perspective, and you taking their perspective as the gospel, rather than the information that you're giving them that has been tried and true, and it is researched and proven to be true, but they aren't willing to follow that lead because they're still invested in their old behavior. Or maybe even uh, that statement of, okay, well, whatever, we'll get around to it, it'll happen or it won't happen. So those are some of the things that you can see with passive aggressive behavior. So how does that differ from open aggression? What is it? Okay, so you got this person coming in, and he or she is coming in, and you can look at their body language and you already know that they're going to come with some verbal attack, or they step into your space or to your office or whatever, and in some regard or the other, whether it's their physical presentation, their body language, or just the things that they say, but they are ready to lash out. So open aggression is when individuals lash out in anger and rage, becoming physically or verbally aggressive, and they can hurt themselves as well as you. So you want to be mindful that their effort is to try to be the one that's in control. Okay? They come in, this comes in a form of bullying. Whether if your client comes in, and let's just say you're inclined to say, okay, John, you can have a seat over there, or you sit at the desk, and I've got to get some information from here or whatever. No, I don't want to sit down. Okay, I don't see why you're telling me to sit down. I've got something to say to you, because this is what I thought that I was supposed to be doing, and it didn't happen. So where's your manager? Where's your supervisor? So recognize that kind of gestures. They are openly aggressive, or they could be very sarcastic and criticizing everything it is that you say. And I know, just as I said with the passive aggression, please try not to take it personal. But those kinds of gestures, we find very difficult not to take personal. Um, when we look at open aggressive, you can be calmly sharing with someone, asking questions or whatever, and they become explosive. That's because, remember what I said a moment ago, their effort is try to control the situation. They have come in, they're asking for assistance. They want your help, but they want your help the way they want your help. They want you to help them the way that they want you to help them. And their behavior, or this behavior, oftentimes is a learned behavior. More often than not, it's a learned behavior. It's like a kid having a temper tantrum in the grocery store, and maybe they can get what they want because you'll be embarrassed. So the individual with the open aggression is there. You're gonna the outbursts or the rage or the name calling, or and they don't. And even though more often than not with open aggression, it is louder than the passive aggressive individual. The open aggression could be, as I said before, sarcasm. So they don't necessarily have to be loud, but they can be insulting, and they can question everything that you say. Well, who told you that? Where'd you get the information? Well, how do I know that that's the right thing? So there's going to always be some kind of pushback. So recognize that. Um, Unfortunately, our society has given us permission to believe that it's okay to be openly aggressive. People come across with verbal abusiveness. They use violent words or obscene gestures, believing that it's okay. And then they'll give you that little grin or that little statement, oh, I was only kidding. I didn't really mean it like that. I don't see why they have to be so sensitive. I mean, can't you take a joke? That's open aggression. The deliberate behavior to undermine and to be intimidating and to bully in some regard is open aggression. We're going to talk a little bit about what to do later on when that individual is openly aggressive towards you. So, what happens when there is a concern and this person really is interested in wanting to do what you're asking or to follow the rules, or you have a concern and it is evident that the individual is not necessarily paying attention, but they want to handle the situation. Okay, so we're going to look at what assertive anger looks like. You know, there's a scripture that says, be angry, but sin not. So we are going to be angry at times, and it can be appropriate anger. Going back to what I said early on about healthy anger, how can I find the energy from that emotion and use it positively? Healthy anger or assertive anger is maintaining your control, your sense of control, but it's also about being confident. It is about listening. It's about asking questions. You're dealing with this kind of anger from a positive perspective because you're looking for growth. You're looking for a positive outcome. It means that you recognize that you have something to say that you want to share, but you also understand that this person is coming from a place of familiarity and they have something to say, and they want it to be understood. Oftentimes when people are particularly openly aggressive, it's because it may very that they feel that they aren't being heard. So one of the things that assertive anger does is to say, okay, I'm hearing that you have a concern. So let's address that concern, because maybe there is a plan that we can work out in terms of moving the deadline. Maybe this person is coming into you and asking for something to happen in the next 6 months. And it may not be feasible for it to happen then in terms of getting their credit taken care of, understanding what needs to be done. And it is a growing process of changing old behaviors. And it may not be able to come to fruition for 12 months, 18 months, maybe even 24 months. But the point is that you're letting them know that you hear them. There's this adage about taking care of the low hanging fruit. So in with assertiveness, where there is anger and you're wanting to be assertive, there's an expression of concern that shows that you're listening. You show that your questions are about flexibility. Okay, you're articulating. Remember, one of the things that we said about unhealthy anger is when the individuals are oftentimes sulky and they're silent and they won't communicate what their concerns are. Well, in assertive anger, you are articulating. You do want to give information and you want to receive information, but you're doing it in a level with a level of confidence and with a level of calmness. Questions like, your issue is a cause for concern. Let's see what we can do. Let's explore what our options are. We are all human. And one of the things that, as a clinician, that I really do recognize is that we all want to be heard. We do. We all want to be recognized. Having been in this business rather, of being a psychotherapist for more than 41 years, I recognize that people become frustrated when they think that they're ignored or dismissed. I think that all of us may have an understanding of what that feeling is like. So when we acknowledge that an individual is frustrated, we can say it's apparent that you're frustrated, and I want to be able to listen so that we can find maybe a healthy way of dealing with the issue. Also ask if there are other circumstances or situations maybe where they have seen the positive results of what they're hoping for. Give people the opportunity to know that they matter by extending a sense of courtesy. Back in the day when I was growing up, we were taught to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir, but also thank you and please. So those are things that thank you and please still goes a very, very long way. So even when that person is openly aggressive, acknowledging the fact that they're frustrated in a calm manner. Again, I want to reiterate, and I'll say that again. Oftentimes, I just like to reiterate, please give yourself permission that that individual is bringing that into your space, and it has really nothing to do with you. Yes, their behavior does affect you, and I'm not trying to encourage you not to pay attention to that, but in terms of you're managing the situation as effectively as you can, because the behaviors, the sarcasm, the name calling sometimes that gets under our skin. So breathe, drink a bit of water if you have some on your desk, and I would encourage that you do that. Just say, let's try to do this again. Why don't we just sit down and see if we can find an answer to what you're looking for? Let's see if we can do that, because it's apparent that there is an issue that you're very passionate about. That's acknowledgement. That's what we're talking about. So we really want to try to manage it. And there are ways in which it is that we can manage. Recognize that we can't force anybody to do anything. In spite of the fact that people may come into your space asking that you do this, that, and a third, understand the end result truly does depend on whether or not they're willing to take the information that you're giving them. You have the right to encourage an individual to take a deep breath, okay? To understand that their behavior is offensive and that it doesn't, it's not going to get them to where they want to go, because in your mind, you're constantly trying to put out fires that they've just started. So your mannerism also helps to influence the manner of that individual, who, even that passive aggressive person, because when you ask them direct questions, and if they say, give you the same roundabout answer, you can acknowledge, yes, I just heard you say that, but I'm asking you this question, and you've not answered that question. Sometimes that is the one of the most effective ways in terms of dealing assertively with an individual who's really angry. So, with that being said, we want to look at some other kinds of things. So we're going to pick up from the last sessions as we talked about the three types of anger, and we want to look at personality types and anger. Okay? So I said that there are four types of personalities that you probably find yourself contending with on a regular basis. So this is kind of a general template, if I can use that term, regardless of the type of regardless of the personality type. If you recognize your audience, be aware of things that you may have seen before, or it's probably not uncommon that you will have seen some of the clients before. You may not have been the individual who's worked with that client, or they may have come in and said, hey, look, I went to another agent and they told me this, that, and a third, but their mannerisms is of such that you can almost understand immediately why it is that they didn't get the information they were supposed to have gotten. And it could be because they weren't listening. It could be because they were um, being belligerent or arrogant or whatever. But be aware, just be mindful, recognize that you've got some tools. You're in this position as counselors, and you've been in this position for a while. So there's some things, some basic principles that you already know about human nature. So don't disregard those things. People can come in and they can tell you, you know, this is something that I've believed in since I was a child, because this is what my grandma said, this is what my mom said, my dad, my great grandma. These individuals are telling you that that belief is well ingrained. So understand that, and in your effort of understanding that, that's going to help you to be able to manage or navigate that situation a little bit more effectively. Um, Oftentimes, these personality types that I'm talking about, they're going to have a lack of flexibility. They aren't going to listen. Going back to what angry people look like, so oftentimes they aren't listening because they want to get their point across. They want to have some level of control over the circumstance, over you, over everything that you have to say, or whatever. So that piece is a general piece of information I want you to recognize when we're dealing with these personality types. They're going to be maladaptive or inappropriate. Sometimes they come in, they're going to be loud, or they're going to be they could possibly present themselves in ways that are so inappropriate in the workplace, but they think nothing of it, right? They believe that they're being cute, or they're a comedian, and they think that everybody's going to laugh, or they are going to be aggressive, as I said before, and sometimes they just want to not be compliant. Okay. So I want you to tell your response to these behaviors, because you are astute enough to understand that there are some things that's going to be repeated, because we're dealing with human nature. So looking at the first type of difficult personality, we're going to talk about narcissistic type. And narcissism is a type of personality where the individual is, we're going to call them a know-it-all. All right. So then there's the histrionic type. So what does that mean? Um, they are very excitable on the one hand, but it is done in a subtle manner. So we'll get there. The dependent type personality. Oh, they want assurance. Did I do that right? Are you sure? We'll talk about that in a minute. And then the obsessive compulsive type. So these personality types are there. I'm telling you this for a reason. Not that I'm trying to encourage you to be a clinician in that regard. In your own rights as a counselor, I've said it before and I'll say it again. You have dealt with human beings. And human beings, though we are different, there are some familiarities that's there. And it's to your advantage to give yourself permission to recognize that, oh, I've seen this before. And yes, maybe there's some things that I can do to manage this a little bit more effectively. Recognize that you're empowered. And as a result of that, in some regard, as you're dealing with different types of personalities, I'm going to show you that in just a second. Oftentimes, these personality types, in some regard, are wanting to be empowered. So we're going to talk about how that looks. As we look at the narcissistic personality, oftentimes they present as non-listeners. They have little or no regard to paying attention to whatever it is that you're saying, because oftentimes they are wanting to seek their 15 minutes of fame or more. They can tell you about whatever because they are absolutely right. There is nothing that you're going to tell them that they aren't going to be able to insert themselves into. If you say, Mr. Jones, it's important that you have this kind of budget in place. Girl, you know, Mrs. Whomever, I have had that budget in place and I have followed it through to the letter, and it would have come out well had it not been for yada yada or whatever. Recognize that it is going to be, regardless of what you say, it is going to be about them. Oftentimes, they will present themselves with arrogancy and sarcasm and criticism because they already know whatever it is that you're sharing with them. And guess what? If other people say or see or have called them to criticize them in some regard, they aren't going to be affected by that because the world can't evolve without their input. So I say that, and I know that it could sound a little bit humorous, but I say it because really there are individuals, there are personalities that are absolutely overbearing with their sense of themselves. So whatever it is that you say, it's going to be about them. Even if it's negative, they're going to try to put a positive spin and make it about them because they are that way. The counter to that is that when these people are talking about all of the fame and fortune and name dropping, and even in their arrogancy and their criticism or whatever, if there is one positive thing that's a genuine attribute to that individual, okay? We're looking at the individual. If there's one thing that you can identify and extend to them as being a positive, then do that and repeat it if necessary. For instance, if that individual is saying to you, "Well, yeah, you know, I know how to do this. I've been in I've been in business for 18 years, and I've done this, that, and the third, and I know exactly what it is that you're talking about." Then you know, Mr. Jones, that was fantastic. And do you remember when you started your business? Something along those lines. My point is, try to find something that is genuine, okay? Try something that's relevant to whatever it is that you're wanting to share with them, that you want them to have as a takeaway. Acknowledge that you heard them, you appreciate that they shared that with you, and by that same with that same behavior, you're going to try to flip it by saying, and I need you to do this thing because this will be very beneficial in your getting to wherever it is that you want to go. Something along those lines. If there's no more, if there's nothing else that they will afford you the opportunity to give to them, repeat it if necessary. Because what you want to do, because if that person has to come to your game, and the probability is greater than not that they will, because they aren't going to listen to you the first time around. But should they do that, then you're able to say, oh, yes, Mr. Jones, remember we were talking about yada, yada. It gives you a better handle in dealing with the individual. Oftentimes, people can come across as angry, and some of them truly are, but some of them are so filled with ingrained behaviors in terms of trying to um, present themselves in such a good light that they can't hear what needs to be heard regarding what they need to do. So understand that we don't know the narrative of individuals, all of the narratives, or the back narrative of individuals when they come in. We don't know their backstory necessarily, okay? But everybody comes with something. So just kind of recognize it from that perspective, all right? The next personality type is the histrionic. This person wants to be center stage. He or she, and more often than not, it's a she, but he or she wants to be recognized because they want to be center stage. Okay, they may be very flirty, may very complimentary. They may be very suggestive, maybe even um, in their own way, they think that they're they're presenting in an inappropriate manner. Their boundaries are blurred. They may get too close to you. They may touch you in a seductive manner. They may make suggestions with their body language or whatever, and they always want to show you that they know more. I say always, they oftentimes want to suggest to you that they know more than they know, and they certainly want you to believe that they're on top of their game, and they're the one-uppers. They're the ones who are, I know what you're talking about, and you know what? Yeah, and if you ask them to do something for 30 days, they're going to tell you that they're going to do it for 60. But the reality is that that's not the truth. They just want you to believe them. They want you to believe that they they had a life that was very different than the one that they're presenting to you in the day that they come in. They always have something else to say when you're making a suggestion. They're going to want to string out, let's just say you give them an hour for the initial consultation, and they're going to want 2 hours simply because they're giving you compliments, and they're going to be laughing and whatever, talking about everything other than focusing on why they're there. So be mindful of that, okay? The counter to that is to clarify the boundaries initially. Clarification is the best defense in handling this type of personality. In spite of the flattery and the flirtation and the subtle, suggestive kinds of manner that they may present, it's imperative that you not yield to their flattery. You want to thank you for the compliment, and the thing that we're talking about now is whatever. Okay, stick to the script, as it were. Set your boundaries, because recognize that this personality has no problems with blurring the boundaries. They will extend themselves in a manner that is so inappropriate in the workplace, and they are going to expect or try to lure you to do the same thing. So stay your course. Clarification. Set the ground rules on the front end. Remain unemotional and be specific regarding the expected guidelines. As it relates to the dependent personality, this individual, he or she, may be very indecisive, but they want your approval and your assurance. They want to know that every little dot, every little T was exactly the way that you wanted it to be. Okay. These individuals oftentimes find themselves, they want approval. They need to be needed. They want to say that their circumstance in terms of coming to you as a counselor is because they had no power, that they were not empowered. They couldn't have made the decision because Fred was supposed to do it, Jean was supposed to have done it, or my husband didn't allow it because he's the head of household and I have to do everything that he says, so I don't have a voice. Or the man comes in and, my wife is, what she says goes, a happy wife is a happy life and I got to do it her way. So it's those kinds of things, but they are in the oftentimes those in particular, and if the couple comes in together, don't be surprised if it um, creates conflict, because that's a part of this personality type. In the workplace, you may see that as gossipers. If you're dealing with other individuals around you and you see, because as I said early on, any of us can be angry or whatever, and any of us can have any parts of these personality types. But as you recognize, I said this on the front end, know your audience. And as you recognize your audience, it helps to keep you in a safe zone so that you don't become affected or drawn in, as it were, to incorporating all of these things into your psyche and saying that I have to. I have to give every time that someone says something, I've got to give a pushback. No, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do that on every occasion. So the counter to this personality type is to encourage a sense of empowerment. You want them to understand by giving them positive affirmations, but again, clarify the expectations that you have for this kind of personality. And what about the personality who has this obsessive compulsive personality? They're inflexible, they're intolerant, they want to control, and they too are indecisive. They want to follow the rules and they want to tell everybody that you have to follow the rules. Even as a counselor, if you're telling them that they need to follow the rules, you may find that they're going to look for some little yeah but statement to say, and this is the reason that I couldn't follow that rule. Okay, but the things that they do oftentimes are ineffective because they are such a grumpy, ill-tempered person. So it's they aren't approachable. It's difficult for you to get to know that you've gotten anything across to them because of their put off kind of personality. So the counter to these individuals is to encourage them to know that they have worth and that you can appreciate the fact that they are about following the rules and they do have value, but it is also helpful for them to try to relax and understand that their value is seen because they you can see the value in them as a result of their interest in certain things, but you want them to understand that they have worth anyway, regardless. The so the next set of things that we want to look at would be the questions. We want to look at what are the 3 types of anger that we talked about? What are the 4 types of personalities? And what is one counter response to a narcissistic personality type? So the 3 types of anger that we talked about was passive aggression, open aggression, and assertive anger. The 4 types, 4 personality types was the narcissistic type, the histrionic type, the dependent type, and the obsessive compulsive type. When we think about what is one counter gesture that we can make towards the narcissistic type personality, is to try to find one thing that's a genuine attribute that you can give to them and compliment them on it. Okay? So let's move on to the healthy and safe response to anger. Assess to determine immediate danger. It is important because of our society to be vigilant. Recognize, I don't know the setup in your offices or what it looks like, or if you are in your office alone or if there are other people there, but be vigilant. Assess to determine immediate danger. Okay? If in imminent danger, remove yourself. Okay? If there's something that alarms you, to say that this is not safe, then whatever your processes are to keep yourself safe, then exercise that. Okay. um, Verbally acknowledge the anger. I recognize that you're upset. If it's not an immediate, or there isn't imminent danger. So if the person comes in, he or she is frustrated or whatever, as I said before, you're going to identify that and you're going to ask, what is it that we can do? Let's see if we can find something that will help to make this a better situation. And I like to encourage you to use the word we, because the responsibility is not yours. And oftentimes, individuals who have not achieved whatever it is that they're looking for, they come in with this "you fix me" or "you fix it" type attitude. The word we is inclusive, so you want to include that. Identify the source of anger. Verbalize feelings of anger in a controlled, assertive way. So you can share the fact that you recognize that they're angry rather, and in your helping them to understand. I heard you say that this is an issue for you, but I would appreciate it if you wouldn't use that kind of word when you're talking with me. Particularly if it's, a very aggressive, um, uh, debilitating type, insulting word. So you're asking them to revisit that. It's also okay in terms of healthy and safe response to anger. You can make a conscious decision to say, Mr. Jones, it appears as if you have not gotten this together right now and you're really, really upset. Let's look and see if we can reschedule you for another day. You are empowered to set some boundaries in terms of what it is that you can and will tolerate. So let me be clear about that. And I haven't said that before. But if you believe that this situation is more than you can handle that day, then it's okay. So let's revisit this. Let me see if I can put you on the calendar for next Wednesday, and we can get together then and see what that looks like. But as I said early on, be clear about the directives that you're giving. Um, Healthy and safe response to anger: stay calm and communicate openly and honestly. Ask, ask, ask. Don't assume, don't presume. It could be as clear as the nose on your face, but even ask. Ask if necessary. Ask someone to be there. If you believe that you're in a situation and you do need backup, go and ask somebody for assistance. If you aren't in the office alone, and if you are, it may be well for you to have a phone, and have it on speaker so that others can hear you or can give suggestions or whatever. And you can say that, Mr. Jones, I'm gonna consult with whomever, and we're gonna get them right here on the phone. So that gives you some sense of safety as well. Agree if possible. Agree to disagree. I know that you say that you want this to happen in 6 months, but under these circumstances, it's going to take a minute for your credit to get in order, and for us to do some things so that we can take care and you have um, a healthy track record in terms of your spending and your idea about money. So those kinds of things. Another thing is, what happens when there is unbridled anger. Okay. The result, we have to be mindful of the way that we appear to people, or our the way that we appear to people, and the impact, that's the word that I was looking for, I'm sorry, the impact that we have on individuals. We can, or people can say, or the individuals that you're talking to, they may say to you, well, my wife is always crying, or my kids are always upset when I say something to them. Um, I can't deal with them. So I just isolate and tell them that I'm not going to talk to them anymore, or I'm just silent. I don't have anything to say, or just leave the room and slam the door. It's hard for me to get anything across to them. They don't hear me unless I'm yelling, or the only way that I can get their attention is when I'm aggressive towards them. You may hear those kinds of things these individuals are not recognizing sometimes that these are signs of individuals who where their anger has not been bridled, where they have not taken control over the responsibility, better word, they've not been responsible for their behavior. Okay, others around them and the individuals themselves, they may not acknowledge that they are angry or that they feel overwhelmed or they feel helpless. Those are some of the things that we talked about unhealthy anger rather. They are helpless or they feel hopeless about a situation. They may find themselves eating to try to find some kind of overeating rather, trying to find some kind of contentment, or drinking more, or some other kind of addictive type behavior because of their unbridled anger. Some of the consequences is they may lose their family and their friends. It is not uncommon that there is a great deal of loneliness, because if people remove themselves from angry people, then they are going to be lonely. And that may bring about a sense of depression. They may lose things that are very important to them. Family and friends are important, but they may lose their livelihood. They may be coming to you because they've lost job after job after job. And it may be one of the things in terms of recognizing your audience. And you can say, well, how many years have you been on this particular job? Not even a year? And did you, well, so what's the longest time that you've ever been on the job? Oh, only 10 months? Then let's look at what it's going to take for you to get to where you need to do. Not that you're trying to fix them, you're giving them information that would be of great benefit to their success. And oftentimes their integrity is compromised, as well as the sense of trust. Personal attitudes of anger. What is your relationship with anger? This is great for all of us, even as a clinician, and as many years as I've been in this field. It's important for me to check myself. You know, what am I feeling today? Have I had my morning constitution? Have I drank enough water? Am I hungry? Or is it time for me to have lunch and now I'm hangry, as they call it? I'm upset because I can't go, and I'm upset because I need to deal with this issue. So we need to check ourselves. And who do we mimic? You know, sometimes people can say, my husband, my wife told me I'm acting just like my mom or dad, or my brother or sister, or the children get really scared of me when I look like that because they say it reminds them of their grandparent. And are you mimicking them in their anger? And what value do you place on anger? So here's a little test. And you choose. Do you choose to answer? This test will give you an idea of how bad or how mild your anger is. And ask yourself, if you choose to answer, what does anger look like to you? Do you sometimes yell or raise your voice to get your point across? Have you ever been arrested or had the police call because of your actions? Do you take out your frustrations while driving? Does it seem to you like other people just don't get it? They just don't get it. They just don't get you. Um, Looking at those questions can help you to recognize how you look with your anger. Now, what's your personal attitude of anger? It's about your getting centered, of focusing on your feelings. Seek an understanding. The scripture tells us that wisdom is the principal thing, but in all thy getting, get an understanding. Covey says, seek first to understand and then to be understood. So we want to understand that if we understand our personal attitude about anger, we can help to diffuse certain circumstances, asking, what am I hearing? Can I focus on what they're talking about? Do I understand what they're saying? Focus on a positive outcome. Start with the end in mind. How would you like for this to end? It may be that it may be that you have to agree to disagree, or it may be that there is a win-win that each of you can agree upon, and you can build from that place. Have a forgiving spirit. You know, sometimes people can come into a situation and they are so irritating and they're so frustrating, and then they calm down and they can hear you. Appreciate that, and thank them for it. I appreciate the fact that we're on a different page now, that we understand each other. Be optimistic in that regard. And remember, articulation is important. Recognize, acknowledge that you hear them. Be flexible in that regard. The best attitudes. If we look for a gentle response, that helps to diffuse anger. If we come back, if we meet an angry person where they are, the probability is that what we are going to get is fire, right? We are going to be angry. They are going to be angry. There's going to be whatever tools that we are familiar with using. It may be that we find ourselves using inappropriate tools. Remember when I was talking about the histrionic type personality? And that person is coming in, and he or she, they may be they may overstep their boundary, and you're insulted by what they say or the questions that they ask or the suggestions that they may make. Be mindful. Be mindful of that so that you can diffuse that situation with a gentle response. Ma'am, I thank you for the compliment, but that's not where I'm coming from. Can we focus on what we're talking about? Sir, I would appreciate if you wouldn't touch me. I would really appreciate that. It's important that we follow through with these concerns that we have right here. Okay? And be cheerful about it as much as possible. I appreciate the fact that you had a comment to make, but we need to stay focused. So a cheerful disposition is good for your health. Okay. People can come in and they're gloomy and sulky, and they aren't talking, and they can look overwhelmed, distraught. You can encourage them. That may be something that they really need, and nobody has done that for a very long time, if ever. And if you can find something that you can compliment them on, then do that. That can be very, very healthy. Sometimes people come in and they are very overwrought. They may be depressed because they're feeling downtrodden, and maybe they've lost a job and they've never had a situation like that before, or it appears as if maybe for the last 5 years nothing seemed to have gone right for them. Something as simple as that they are able to get up and dress themselves and come to the office, right? That's a blessing. Maybe you can start from there. uh, Recognize the importance of a cheerful disposition, and that's what I'm trying to say. Recognize that a gentle a gentle response can go a very, very long way. Understand, as I said early on, that we don't know everybody's backstory. We don't. You've got a lot of information to give. As counselors, you see people, they come in, they want what they want. You want what you want because you know that you've got information to give them. You want them to take this information. You want them to be successful. And you can say that. You can encourage them. It is not so uncommon to find people who believe that they've never had an opportunity to be empowered. They may already be feeling dejected and lost and um, just unsuccessful in every way that you can think of. But if there's something that you can say to point out to them, no, but you did this very well. Maybe they have been job hopping for the last 2 or 3 years. And they say the longest that they've stayed on the job was 10 months. Well, okay, so you stayed on it 10 months. What did you do? Help them to find that nugget, that thing that was positive, that was effective, helping them to understand that you made it because you made a conscious decision to follow this particular track, to do this particular thing. Remember when we were talking about the definition of anger? And one of the things that I said is that oftentimes the personal trigger comes from an assessment that a person has made, or an assumption or a perception of something that has hurt them. We all have hurt. We know what hurt feels like, and maybe we've all been hurt at some point or the other. So what we're trying to say is that you understand that it is not an easy tasking, but it's not necessarily an impossible tasking. And if they're willing to focus on a positive outcome, then you're willing to assist them. So that's that we part that we were talking about. You're giving them what they need, but they have to take ownership. There's some responsibility that they have to be willing to undertake. There's some things that they have to do. There's an adage that I used to hear when I was a kid, put some skin in the game. So what's your investment? And remember this, an ingrained behavior is greater than a conscious promise. Helping a person to understand that statement means those things that they are most familiar with, those are the things that they're going to go to first. Those are the things that any of us, that's what we're going to do first, because that's our first line of defense. And that was a learned behavior. We want to unlearn that behavior. But if we want to unlearn that behavior, we have to have ready, on the ready and to go, a positive, uh, healthy behavior to insert, because it's going to take a minute for that old ingrained behavior to fall off the grid. So we have to be emotionally invested in the new behavior. So when we're talking to individuals about changing their behaviors and their attitudes and how not to be so angry, we can give them permission to know that it's okay to say no. No is a complete sentence, but yes is a complete sentence too. We don't have to be aggressive. We don't have to choose that as our norm. We can be accountable. We can make a conscious decision to say, let's do this differently, because that's not how I want to be identified. I want my integrity. I want to be trustworthy. I don't want to come across as a know-it-all or a flirt all the time, or a dependent personality, or a old grumpy ill-tempered person. I want to give because I want to receive. And I've got something to give. And you can encourage them to say that. They do have something to give. And it doesn't have to be anger. So, looking at some of the best attitudes that you can have towards anger, if you do that, you can give it away. If you handle them in a gentle spirit, somebody somewhere is going to be influenced by what you say, and they're going to take on your gentle spirit in dealing with other circumstances in their world. Be patient and persistent when you are dealing with situations where individuals may be aggressive. Um, Gentle speech break down rigid defenses. Remember when we talked about thank you and please? Those are things. Sometimes people are surprised that you said thank you. Use those things. You've got them. You've had them. You are in this line of work because you're dealing with human beings and human nature. And there's a desire for you to do this on some level or the other. So use tools that you would want others to use towards you. A good person's mouth is a clear fountain of wisdom. A foul mouth is worse than a stagnant swamp. So when you ask Mr. Fred or Bob or Ted to not use that term, you can say, yeah, that just doesn't give me a warm and fuzzy. Can we do something a little bit different? What about this word? Okay, what if we use this word? Let's see if we can do it a little bit differently or whatever. And then it's like you're walking together in that regard, helping people to understand anger isn't doing what they think that they're doing. Remember, I was saying that more often passive aggressive or even openly aggressive individuals, they want to be in control. Help them to understand you can get the control that you're looking for if you're willing to give. Let's give something if you want to get something. And remember what I said, it's okay to say that behavior is not accepted in my space. So let's see if we can do this differently. You are empowered to ask for what you need, just like you're encouraging your clients to ask for what they need. That part is really important. Um, One of the others, kind words heal and help. Cutting words wound and maim. We know that. Okay. So, as I said before, go ahead and be angry. You do well to be angry, but don't let your anger, don't use it as a fuel or as revenge. Okay. Don't stay angry. Be able to say to that person, you know, I see that you're frustrated and this may not be where you want to be today at this stage in your life. You want it to be different. But because we're still here, this can be the first day of the rest of your life. Let's see what we can do about it. Try to put a positive spin, and not to be Pollyanna, not to be flippant, but to share with them, hey, there is a different way in which we can look at this and we can get the job done if you're willing to be patient and persistent and be committed to what you are feeding. A minister said this to me once: what we feed will grow. And if you don't want those negative outcomes, then how that we can turn it around by looking at it from this perspective. And we can find that there are positive outcomes. Okay. Question number 3, true or false? Um, a consequence of we number 2. These are true or false questions. A consequence of unbridled anger is loss. True or false? Anger is a negative emotion and should never be expressed. True or false? One of the best remedies for anger is to use kind words. True or false? Well, we know that it is a consequence of unbridled anger is loss, and that's true. We know that anger, the question is, anger is a negative emotion and should never be expressed. We know that that's false. We know that if we don't talk about how we feel or where we are, then we leave it to others to read our minds, and people can't read our minds. So it's important to express it, but to express it in a manner that's acceptable, not with violence and violent words or aggression. And the last one was, one of the best remedies for anger is to use kind words, and that's true. I am hopeful that this session was of interest to you. I am hopeful that it will help you in some regard in dealing with the clients that we'll be presenting to you, and not just in your offices or wherever it is, but in your walk of life. I pray that you will recognize that we are all human beings and we all have our own narratives, our own backstories, as it were, and that we do look for something. And sometimes when we perceive something in a particular way, that it may come back to us as if um, we have been offended in some regard. And now we are wanting to give ourselves permission to revisit that and determine that we can handle even angry people in a more positive way by appreciating some things that they are bringing, but to also set very clear boundaries and help them work through where they are. I thank you.
Dr. Tart, thank you. Thank you. This has been a great session. And thank you for helping us move into 2020 and beyond as we deal with the clients that we serve on a day to day basis. Not all are angry, but many of them are. I know that you have several helpful resources for us that we can use, and I'll slide that over, and maybe you can give some comments on the resources that you've made available.
Okay. Going to the Help Center, the Recognizing Anger. That's a web from the American Psychological Association, and there is just a plethora of information in terms of not just anger, but other kinds of issues that people may present, and it could be of help to you. And they make it very plain, so that that can be a benefit. Better health and a victory over better health, the betterhealth.victory.gov. That was a great website in terms of understanding what the body does and what we can do to keep ourselves in a healthy mindset. The mental health.net was an excellent one to understand what it looks like to have a healthy mind, as it were. Very well minded is another, and understanding passive aggressive behaviors, as well as tips for coping with angry behavior, or your angry behavior. That's where I got the quiz from. And I would appreciate it if you guys would take the time and go there and do the quiz yourselves and ask others around you, what investment do they have with anger. And that too, knowledge can be very, very powerful. So if the more that we know about these things, the healthier that we can become. The other part of that is Psychology Today. It gave some of the tidbits about the different type personalities that I talked about. And you can see where this can make sense in the workplace as well as in your personal lives in terms of understanding different type personalities. And some of the healthy things and the best ways of dealing with anger. Of course, I must admit reading my favorite book of reading is the scripture. So from Bible Gateway, I got some very good pieces of information to share with you. So I
Well,
thank
thank you, and thank you again. We really appreciate this. This has been very helpful, not only to me, but those that are listening to this particular recorded message. And guys, you can listen to this over and over again if you'd like, in order to get some helpful hints and tips that have been shared by Dr. Jerry Tart. Dr. Tart, you've been a great supporter of Diversified Resource Network, and we really appreciate that. For those of you who are not members of Diversify, a copy of our website link is at the bottom. The URL is in the bottom left-hand corner of this slide. We encourage you to become a member. Membership is free, and there you'll find some other recorded pieces from Dr. Tart that she's done on PSD. Maybe I'm not getting that correctly right, Dr. Tart. PTSD.
you. Yes, yes, yes. PTSD. PTSD.
PTSD. It's a great piece because we're living in an environment where consumers are coming into us and they're very stressed out, particularly those that are in areas where there's been disasters. And we need to know how to assist those families and understand why they're responding in the way that they're responding. We promise we'll bring more recorded sessions from Dr. Jerry Tart. Be on the lookout, but you can only be made aware of it by being a member of Diversified Resource Network, and membership is totally free. At this point, we're going to sign off and say again, thank you, Dr. Tart, for just
You
a
are so welcome. Thank you.
standing,
Okay,
and we
bye-bye.
look forward to working with you again. Bye now.
Excellent. You too. Bye-bye.